Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Yes. Are you all things IT ready?
Yes, we now call this meeting in order. The chamber evacuation announcement. Upon activation of the emergency alarm signal, all persons should immediately exit the building. Please use the exits to the left or right front of the council chamber or the east or west stairwell outside the rear doors of the chamber. Do not use elevators or escalators. After exiting the building, security would direct everyone down 9th Street to the assembly area located inside the former public safety building parking lot. Able persons should assist visually and hearing impaired visitors with exiting the building. And Madam President, for the record, all members are in attendance this evening with the exception of Councilor Lynch and Ms. Alberbacher. You do have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Let's proceed with the docket review.
Starting with the consent agenda, item number one, ordinance 2025-014. Planning Commission recommended a continuance, so this item is to be continued to December the 8th. Item two, ordinance 2025-113. This paper was amended at the October 14th council meeting. It's currently being retained on this evening's consent agenda. Item three, ordinance 2025-150. Planning Commission recommended approval with an amendment. However, this paper is to be continued to the January 12th council meeting awaiting that amendment. Item four, ordinance 2025-174. This paper was amended at the October 14th meeting. It's currently being retained on this evening's consent agenda. Items 5 and 6, ordinance 2025-209 and 2025-211. Governmental Operations Standing Committee recommended continuance. However, both papers are to be amended later this evening and then continue to the December 8th council meeting. Item 7, ordinance 2025-214. This paper was amended at the October 14th council meeting and will be retained on this evening's consent agenda. Item 8, ordinance 2025-215. Planning Commission recommended a continuance, so this item is to be continued to the December 8th council meeting. Item 9, ordinance 2025-222. Public Safety Standing Committee recommended approval. Item 10, ordinance 2025-225, Finance and Economic Development Standing Committee recommended approval. Item 11, ordinance 2025-227, Planning Commission recommended approval. Item 12, ordinance 2025-228, Planning Commission recommended approval with an amendment, and so this paper is scheduled to be amended later this evening and then continue to the December 8th council meeting. Item 13 and 14, ordinance 2025-229 and 2025-230, Planning Commission recommended approval. Item 15, ordinance 2025-231, Planning Commission recommended a continuance, so this item is to be continued to the January 12th council meeting. Items 16 through 18, ordinance 2025-232, 233, and 234, Finance and Economic Development Standing Committee recommended approval. Item 19, ordinance 2025-235, Planning Commission recommended approval. Items 20 and 21, ordinance 2025-236 and 237, Finance and Economic Development Standing Committee recommended approval. Items 22 and 23, ordinance 2025-238 and 239, Land Use, Housing, and Transportation Standing Committee recommended approval. Item 24, ordinance 2025-241, Planning Commission recommended approval. Item 25, Resolution 2025-R043, Finance Economic Development Standing Committee recommended approval. However, the patron has requested that this paper be continued to the December 8th council meeting and referred to the November 19th Finance and Economic Development Standing Committee meeting to consider for consideration of an amendment. So if it is the consensus of council, this item will be continued to the December 8th council meeting. So that paper will be continued to the December 8th council meeting. Item 26, Resolution 2025 R044, Land Use, Housing, and Transportation Standing Committee recommended approval. Item 27, Resolution 2025 R045, Land Use, Housing, and Transportation Standing Committee recommended a continuance. So this item is to be continued to the December 8th council meeting. Items 28 through 30, Resolution 2025 R047, R048, and R049. Committee referral was waived on all three items. All are to be retained on this evening's consent agenda. On the regular agenda, we have item 31, ordinance 2025-161. This paper was amended at the October 14th council meeting. It's currently being retained on this evening's regular agenda. Item 32, ordinance 2025-180. This paper is to be continued to the December 8th council meeting. Item 33, ordinance 2025-190. This paper was continued at the October 14th council meeting, and it will also be continued again to December the 8th, awaiting the bids. Item 34, ordinance 2025-210, Government Operations Standing Committee recommended a continuance, so this item is to be continued until the December 8th council meeting. Item 35, ordinance 2025-240, Government Operations Standing Committee also recommended a continuance. However, this paper also will be amended later this evening and then continued to the December 8th council meeting. And lastly, item 36, Resolution 2025 R046, Land Use, Housing, and Transportation Standing Committee recommended a continuance. So this item is to be continued to the December 8th council meeting. And Madam President, those are all the items on this evening's docket.
Councilwoman Tremmel. We just skip that.
2025-1.
Yes, we will.
We will.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And Madam President, would you like to go on to the next item?
Yes, let's proceed to the next item.
The next item is an update on homeless services and the strategic plan to end homelessness.
That's Ms. Saylor and Ms. Popovich.
Good afternoon, President Newbill, Vice President Jordan, and members of council. We are here today to give an Office of Homeless Services update. I was going to give a preliminary comment before handing it over to the Manager of Homeless Services, Allison Saylors. Tonight, you'll hear some discussion around the strategic plan to end homelessness, which was created in 2020. We have some updates. We've made some progress, but we've got further to go, which we'll look forward to really updating that plan in the spring. We opened our Community Resource and Training Center last November, and our Office of Homeless Services team is working with the Office of Community Wealth Building, with Housing and Economic Development, to really make sure that the work that we're doing as a city is combined and streamlined together for our community. But as we all know, there are lots of outside factors that really create some of these challenging opportunities: administrative changing, rent costs, job availability. And one of the ways we can partner with you all is about advocacy happening across the street. We know that state and federal funding for our unhoused populations are at risk, and any changes to those fundings could really impact this community in a significant way. But I'll end up on one of the most positive changes since 2020 is really our regional effort to partner on this together. And Allison will cover this, but our region really is coming together to see the challenges around our unhoused population together, and have made some significant financial contribution to that. So look forward to sharing that to you. Without further ado, Manager of Office Homeless Services, Allison Saylors.
Good evening, Council, President Newbill, and Vice President Jordan, and council members. Good to see you all. Actually, is this my clicker? Okay. So we will go through the Office of Homeless Services update. Maybe. Oh, okay. So quick agenda, we'll start with Ordinance 2018-241, just reviewing what that ordinance did and kind of the catalyst for this report today. We will give an update on our plan to update the strategic plan to end homelessness that was established and published in 2020. We'll go over some current data and trends as we see in the community. We'll go over shelter and housing capacity updates, and then we will end talking about effects of the federal government shutdown and other federal changes. So the ordinance number 2018-241 was adopted at the end of 2018. It mandated a strategic plan to end homelessness that is to be updated every 2 years. The strategic plan was updated in 2020 to run through 2030. And the ordinance also mandated an annual progress report to council on goals to expand housing and shelter capacity in Richmond. So that is the update that we are giving today, is on those housing and shelter capacity, and a few other updates that we've been asked to give throughout the past few weeks. So the strategic plan to end homelessness, we are hoping to have an update for you late spring 2026. We will work with the Housing and Community Development Department and the Greater Richmond Continuum of Care, which is the planning agency for the COC, to evaluate the goals and program performance set out in the strategic plan, as well as looking at preserving existing shelter and housing options and positioning the community to strengthen our services for our most vulnerable residents in the face of all these federal changes that we'll talk about in a bit. The Housing and Community Development Department is in the midst of conducting community surveys and stakeholder meetings as part of their 5-year consolidated planning process. We know those results will definitely inform our strategic plan, and we also plan to lead with inclusive engagement of residents, service providers, and people with lived experience to make sure that all of our updates are really grounded in the reality and with that people with boots on the ground are seeing. I'll give you some updated numbers in terms of how many people are experiencing homelessness in Richmond. In July 2025, the point in time count, we had 680 people. That is not a significant difference from the January 2025 count. About half were unsheltered, half were sheltered. 45% of people surveyed during that time reported Richmond as their last locality of stable housing, and about half reported economic factors as the primary cause of their homelessness. I'll also just note about 25% of people surveyed in the PIC count were 60 years or older. This is the fastest growing group of people experiencing homelessness nationwide, and it's definitely going to be something that we will want to take a hard look at in our update to the strategic plan. We'll look at some trends, kind of what we've seen in the past leading up to now. I'll point your attention to the graphic on the bottom left, just to give you an idea of how Richmond compares to the rest of the state and other localities. We have the lowest per capita rate of homelessness compared to Virginia, as well as Fairfax, Virginia Beach, and Roanoke. So I think that's important to note. We know that homelessness is certainly a problem in Richmond, but it's good to know how we compare to the rest of our neighbors. As you can see on the top right graphic, we have seen homelessness increase in the past 5 years in Richmond. Not a super significant increase, but it is noteworthy that it is trending upwards, as it was trending downwards since 2010. One of the causes for that is the rent increase. Between 2020 and 2025, it jumped nearly 24%. I would argue in Richmond, it's a little bit more. These numbers here are based on the greater Richmond area. We know Richmond, I think the average rent that I saw most recently was about $1,500 for a 1-bedroom apartment. And then we also know that our overall population has increased and the rental vacancy rate has decreased, leading to those higher rent prices as well. Current shelter and housing inventory. I won't spend too long on this, but I just kind of want to give you an idea of what we're seeing in the greater Richmond region. All of these numbers and the graphics in the previous slide were provided by Homeward in their annual report. Just want to make sure they get their credit. So in the greater Richmond area right now, we have a little over 1,100 PSH units, 263 rapid rehousing units, and 384 year-round shelter beds. So one of the strategies in the strategic plan was to expand shelter capacity. I'm going to give you an update on year-round beds and inclement weather shelter beds. So year-round beds obviously operate year-round. They provide the basic needs plus case management services, and they typically require a referral. So in 2020, that's number is 335, number of year-round shelter beds in Richmond. Today we have 384, so that's about a 49-bed increase. Part of the reason for that increase is that Richmond is funding 100 year-round beds as of today. So we can see that there's been good progress made towards that goal. On the inclement weather shelter side, so these are beds that are typically open November 15th through April 15th, with additional activation days possible based on temperature or weather events. And this is a walk-up shelter, no referral necessary. In 2020, we had 150 beds. 2025, we have 166, with the addition of the surge shelter with Caritas that I'll talk about next. So the city currently is contracted with 3 shelter providers to, again, expand our shelter capacity. All of these providers are reputable. They all have over 40 years experience working with Richmond's homeless population, and they're all also members of the GRCOC. So you can see that we've partnered with Home Again to open a 50-bed family shelter in 2023. We partnered with Salvation Army to open a 106-bed inclement weather shelter and 50-bed year-round men's shelter. And again, Caritas adding up to 60 additional IWS beds starting December 1st. And all of these, I'll also note, are partnerships that our regional partners are in on as well. So like Amy noted, we do have good regional partnerships here. And I'll also note that that top number, the total shelter investments from fiscal year 24 through 26, does include some investments from our partners. The other goal around housing in the strategic plan was to expand permanent supportive housing capacity. Permanent supportive housing is a long-term rental assistance and supportive service program, and it serves people that are chronically homeless, so people that have been homeless for at least 1 year and have a documented disability. From 2020 to 2025, we've added 86 PSH units. That's the Cool Lane project with SupportWorks. And then in the next 5 years, we have 110 new PSH units planned to come online. And you can see a summary of those projects here. Again, Cool Lane has been completed. We have 4 projects in progress to add PSH units, and then we have 1 preservation PSH unit. Or project, sorry. Okay, switching gears a little bit, going to talk about federal government shutdown updates. SupportWorks Housing's HomeLink PSH HUD Direct contract. So this is a contract that this is money that they receive directly from HUD. It is not through the city. It is not through the COC. Their contract expired on October 31st, 2025, due to the government shutdown and lack of federal funding availability. As a result, all of those participants have not had their November rent paid. That's 153 Richmond residents, and you can see some of the challenges that they face. They are documented, and 105 landlords across the region will be impacted by this. SupportWorks, we actually have their HomeLink program manager in the crowd, Denise Bavaro. Her and I have been in contact the past few weeks to kind of see how things are going. They have been in consistent contact with their program participants and their landlords on the temporary unavailability of funding. They've actually worked to secure rental assistance for 14 of their participants through an MOU with another local nonprofit. And I'll also note that my office, Homeward, and the city's intergovernmental affairs director have met with both state senators' offices to update them on this situation, as well as other federal changes that we're seeing coming down the pike. Also noteworthy that should the government shutdown continue, 2 other rapid rehousing contracts will lapse between now and the end of the year. Other potential federal changes at HUD. So there is a possible forthcoming fiscal year 25 COC NOFO that would, if it goes into effect the way that it's written, reduce permanent housing funding, which is both rapid rehousing and PSH, COC funding from 87% to 30%. So this means if this were to go into effect, up to 550 individuals and families enrolled in those programs could lose their housing and access to supportive services. The compressed application timeline would also cause significant challenges for COC providers. I'll mention in discussions with state senators, we were able to confirm that both of our state senators have signed a letter urging HUD to extend all current COC contracts for 1 year. So this essentially will be put off for at least that amount of time. I will wrap up there. I'll say that although there's still a lot of work to be done, the city is the most invested in homeless services it's been, and it's made significant strides in building great relationships with experienced providers, and as Amy mentioned, engaging our regional partners to do this work. The federal funding changes, the increasing cost of living, and a growing and aging homeless population will cause unique challenges to strategic planning, and we anticipate making significant changes to the plan as a result. And we look forward to coming back in the spring with those changes. And I will leave room for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sailors. Members, do you have questions at this point? Councilmember Lynch?
Yeah, I was trying to hold on my questions, so I didn't want to interrupt you, but so they're going to be a little all over the place. So first one is in regards to the point in time count. This has been a kind of a long-standing debate about whether or not the way that Richmond does its point in time count really accurately captures everyone that truly is out there. I know that we are limited by, the HUD definition of homelessness versus the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness, which the latter being much more inclusive of transient families or any family or individual that does not have a permanent address. We, at least my understanding in the grand scheme of things, when we do our point in time count, we, of course, count all of our GOC sheltered individuals. If we're doing it during the cold months, we'll count the inclement weather shelter, and then we'll go to kind of known locations where encampments are.
Mm-hmm.
But that certainly does not capture everyone who's unsheltered in a motel, in a car, and then again, capturing the families or individuals that might be doubled up and don't have a permanent address. So is there something different about the way that Richmond is doing its point in time count than, say, Roanoke or Virginia Beach that might have a higher, I just find it interesting they have a higher PIT than we do. It just doesn't really make sense, does it?
But no, it's a good question. I'll say I can certainly look into that, and it would be interesting to know. But from every research that I've read, it's always understood that it's an undercount, but by how much really varies depending on the community. And it goes back, I think, to staffing some too. We had a larger outreach team a couple years ago. We have a smaller outreach team now. So really it's the capability of the volunteers and the staff that are there. I mean, that definitely plays a part in how many people you're going to be able to count.
Okay. And I think that's an important caveat as people look at kind of the universe of vulnerable citizens that, we might be obligated to provide not only shelter for, but then that whole continuum of homeless services and rehousing services.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the second question is as it relates to our inclement weather shelter and kind of more of the process by which individuals are accessing that shelter. And we have invested a significant amount of money, more than any other locality in the region, to ensure that we have not only a walk-up shelter for individuals, but that there is also some way that our unhoused families who may be exposed to the elements also have either an emergency placement or hoteling option, or get into the Home Again shelter that we allocated money for. given that we have very limited access and that we don't have a walk-up family shelter, what I am hearing is that when families do or have approached the Salvation Army, that they are our current inclement weather shelter, that they are turned away. So do we know for a fact that we have a good process, and can we just put that process out there for families? If it's, go to the community resource center, I know, Amy, when I talked about that earlier, if it's go to the community resource center, have that, but like blast that everywhere, because that is something I think that is a huge missing gap for us, that we don't have a walk-up family shelter. And we are starting to see more and more families come forward and say, I'm on the street tonight. What do I do?
Yes, I think we can absolutely say come to the resource center. That was something that I wanted to mention today. Is that we are there, we are open, and that is a role that we can play. Is to not just do the emergency hoteling, but really like talk to these families, like figure out, do you have any other options? If especially we have limited resources, I'd love to use those resources more for permanent housing solutions rather than a hotel stay. So yes, they can absolutely come there, and I will look into the situation with Salvation Army. I know last year there was kind of an on-call situation that was happening. I don't know if it was how official it was, but we'll get our process locked down with them so that they have a person to call when that happens, because it will happen. Yeah.
Is in regards to the HUD home funding that is a part of the ARPA, the grander kind of ARPA package. I think collectively as a region, we received, I might mess this number up because it's been a while, like 7.63 million, I believe. And that this council body actually passed a resolution, expressing the desires of where that money would be used. Unfortunately, that resolution was discarded, and all of the funding went into permanent supportive housing. So the question, which is great, I mean, everybody's all for PSH, right? But looking at the total number of PSH units that we have now, seems like we should have a lot of, we had $7.3 million going to permanent supportive housing. Like, are those numbers reflective of what we got out from that grant? And if so, why so little? And if not, then where is that money now, and where is it in process in getting more PSH units?
I think that's a question that I could take back to HCD as well, and kind of between the two of us get you an answer as to where the funding has come from for those projects that we listed at the top. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Sailors. Thank you for the report. Overall, I didn't see her light came up there last. I'll go on and just a question for you. I wanted to make sure that, and I believe it is the case, that you're aware of the encampment on Grace, and just wanted to get some sense of what you're looking at in terms of steps to work with the individuals to ascertain circumstance, and then resourcing and trying to get them sheltered and supported.
Yep, I just had a meeting about this today. So my city outreach workers, as well as outreach workers at RBHA and Daily Planet, have all been engaged with the group that you're speaking of on Gray Street. RPD has also been involved. Some of their community officers have been out there and have a strong presence. The count that I got today was it's maybe between 8 and 10 individuals out there. Most are street homeless. A couple actually have housing. So our goal is to really work with them where they are. Again, the idea I've gotten is that there's a level of hesitation to engage in services. My hope is that many of these individuals will be using the inclement weather shelter in the next few weeks as it gets colder, and we'll have a better shot of really targeting interventions and talking to them, having better conversations in that type of setting rather than on the street.
Thank you for that update.
Yeah.
Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the presentation. I just have a couple of questions, I think. If I'm looking at the total dollar investment by the city at the present time for the current shelters, it looks like it's a little less than $3 million. Is that an annual?
That's annual.
That's annual. Okay. For the, do we have any historic information on from last year, how many folk actually showed up for shelters? How many could we accommodate? Are we still having the same number of beds available at the same locations? Do we have historic data on that?
We do. I could give you some right now. I mean, the number of beds has not changed since last year, and we've had the addition again of Caritas with the surge beds. I know inclement weather shelter last year, 948 individuals were served. I could get you the numbers for home again as well, but that for last year, that's that number, how many people served.
Okay, so from what I recall from last year, we got a lot of calls about people showing up and not being able to, either there was not capacity, and so some reflection on our history of that, whether or not we actually had available beds or whether or not there were other complications that we encountered last year that we're making corrections for this year. I wanted to ask you about the permanent supportive housing. As you stated, the proposed federal dollars and other dollars that are available to support supportive housing is expected to be cut drastically, down to 30% of the 5 projects that you have identified in your presentation. Are these new projects that are coming on, and do you know whether or not they're going to be subjected to this cut? And if so, what are we projecting will be the impact increasing homelessness due to the lack of the severe cut that's being made in supported permanent housing?
I mean, the anticipated changes, like, I mean, again, for people that are in COC programs, we're anticipating, I think, 550 people that could fall back into homelessness if their housing assistance goes away as a result of these cuts. In terms of the risk of the projects that are ongoing in the community, the PSH units that are coming online, I don't have exact information on the, how likely it is that funding might go away, but I can certainly get you that information.
Okay, because we are aware that there are existing, and I don't think any they are listed here, service providers for permanent supportive houses that have not got their funding for this year. And are we counting that number in our projections for homelessness? Because, if they don't get the federal dollars, then we can't close that gap. And many of them providing housing with smaller landlords that cannot absorb that significant cut. So I'm concerned that our anticipation of the increase in homelessness due to service providers that are not being funded, that we know who they are, what that funding gap is, and we are anticipating the increase.
So we will be working very closely with the COC to understand more of that information about, the changes that are coming that would result as with the funding change going from 87% to 30% for permanent housing. I think that will be our role, is really to help understand the numbers that way with partnership with them, because they are the pass-through entity that gives those funds out to all the COC funded organizations. Sure.
Yeah, sure.
I'll just add, so the Greater Richmond Continuum of Care, many of you may know, is a network of 12, 14 different organizations that is really the backbone organization is Homeward. So Homeward is the organization that receives those federal funds directly and then essentially has a grant-making process to then give those funds. So just wanted to be clear that those funds don't come through the city directly, they go through Homeward. However, we're very much in conversation with those organizations and with Homeward should that happen. Right now, it's uncertain because that actual federal notice of award hasn't come out yet. So we don't know if that cut will happen or not, but we're hearing that it might, and we're wanting to plan for it. So those numbers wouldn't have been reflected in the point in time count in July, for example. We didn't know this data point in July, but we're wanting to be prepared in conversations with partners, as we mentioned. SupportWorks is in the audience today. Should that happen, and when, as soon as that notice of award comes out, if there is that cut, we'll need a multi-tiered strategy on how we could prevent that, because that's the last thing we want to do is have those folks back on the street. We'd really want to strategize from a funding perspective what that short-term coverage could be and then what the long-term strategy is.
Thank you. Council?
There are independent housing, permanent housing providers that have already lost their federal dollars. Point-in-time account, when do you do that?
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
The count that we do for homelessness, did you say that you do that in July?
Yeah, point in time count, and we could say this together, is also run by Homeward. So Homeward is the backbone organization, and Councilwoman Lynch referenced this earlier. It is a HUD process that happens nationally twice a year in January and in July. We often send volunteers and send support to do those counts, but Homeward is the entity that runs the survey and then does the aggregate data on the back end.
All right, thank you very much.
Councilmember Gibson?
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to bring up an awkward discussion. So several weeks ago, the U.S. District Court charged one of the city's former, I believe, homeless service providers with embezzlement for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm referring to Sisters Keepers. And so I want to understand those funds. Were they one-time funds? Were they recurring funds? What's happening now? And what are we doing internally to ensure that the entities that we are tasking to support the most vulnerable residents that we have in the city are delivering on the promises that have been made?
Do you want to speak to the first part?
Thanks, Council Member Gibson. I think it's a good topic to talk about, actually. Neither Allison nor I was at the city at that point, so we could get you information on those previous contracts, but I can speak to what we're doing now. So we have invested in Caritas, in Home Again, and in Salvation Army. All three of those organizations were founded in the late 80s, early 90s. So they have a proven track record here in Richmond over decades and decades of working specifically with the homeless population. We certainly do have extensive contracts with each of them. And in addition to the contract, as an addendum, they have somewhere between 10 and 15 pages that are attached to each of those contracts on what their processes are. What's their process for intake? What's their process for security? What's their process on food? A myriad of things to ensure that we both know what's happening in those centers and that we can hold them accountable to that. There's regular reporting, they're subject to audits, all those kind of really significant things that are in contracts. Additionally, we do site visits regularly. I've been to all three of those sites myself in my 6 months here to make sure that we're seeing what's happening, that we're regularly in that. Many of you may be aware that the Salvation Army building is actually adjacent to our Community Resource and Training Center. So it's pretty easy to tell what's happening when you share walls with an organization, for example. So it's very important to us that when we're putting out that information that anyone would be able to apply, but that we have very specific and necessary requirements that those organizations meet to make sure that our residents are treated well and that the services that we've required are being met.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you both. Really appreciate the update and look forward to additional information as we proceed to address the host of challenges that have been shared, whether it's, supportive housing, the entire continuum. So thank you and look forward to ongoing updates in this regard. And welcome aboard.
Thank
you. With that, I think our council chief of staff has an item.
Yes, ma'am, Madam President. Just a quick update. Members, earlier I have shared with you all the final draft of Council's 2026 General Assembly legislative agenda. This document was put together by your city lobbyists, and this was based on council feedback, their advice, and our working partnership with city administration. And I will move forward with drafting the necessary legislation to put this into effect.
Okay, so next steps for us?
Yes, legislation will have to be drafted to through resolution to make this official. But our city lobbyists are understand the desires of council and how they interact with the General Assembly.
Okay. Members, any questions, comments, et cetera, at this point? Seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Lynch.
Just more of a comment first. I think this is good package. We still plan on it, just don't want to lose sight of the important conversation that we had during our last meeting about just kind of reforming the process. So whoever is taking up the mantle on that sounded like Councilmember Gibson might have a resolution. I know we were thinking about, putting some thought into what that looks like. I just don't want to lose sight on that, but this is a good package.
Thank you. And it's definitely, Councilwoman Gibson mentioned that last session. And our council chief of staff is also bringing forward paper with that, but also our council chief of staff will be working in conjunction to make sure we get a draft in a timely enough fashion to be able to have input and to get to a finalization on it. So thank you. With that, members, if there are no other items for discussion for this meeting, seeing none, this meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.